In today's video, we're going to show you how to create an invoice, how to send the invoice, and then we're going to give you a glimpse of what your client or your customer sees when they receive an invoice and when they go ahead and pay that invoice. So to get started, we're going to go ahead and create that invoice. The fastest way to create an invoice is from your home dashboard. Up in the top right, if you hit this plus, this quick add section, you'll be able to select invoice and start that process. Or you can go over to the left-hand side to the Invoices tab, where you'll be able to see a list of all the invoice that you've sent. Now, this is the first invoice that has been created with this account. So you'll see a create a new invoice button here. But once you start populating invoices for your business, you will not see this button here. So the best way to start a new invoice is to go to the right-hand side here and select new invoice. Now we're on the create an invoice screen. If you notice, the screen is split into two sides. The left-hand side over here with the details, items, and payment is where we're going to populate the information for this invoice. And on the right-hand side, it gives us a really nice preview of what the invoice is going to look like when your customer or your client receives that invoice. And it comes with all the branding that you've set on your account, and it looks specific to your brand. So we're going to go ahead and fill out some information here on the left-hand side. And then I'm going to come back and go over the information that has been populated. Now that we've populated all of this information here to the invoice, we can go ahead and go over and review the invoice. If you notice, everything that I've had it on the left-hand side has populated here on the right-hand side as a preview to what it is that your client is going to receive. So to start, we have our contact here. So we've already added a contact in a previous video. Please check out the how to add a contact video to see more details on that. But if you had to, you can go ahead and select to create a brand new contact from here, from within the invoice. We're going to go ahead and go with our previously made contact time chain. Now here next to it, we have our invoice number, and our invoice numbers in Zaprite increment by 1. So considering this is our very first invoice from this account, this is the number 1 invoice. But when you go ahead and send the second one, you'll see a 2, 3, 4, etc., etc. It's a really good way to stay organized and be able to recall a certain invoice number whenever you need to pull up that information. Next to that is our invoice date, and this is the date that is created and the date that is sent out. Underneath that, we have our payment terms. And if you remember from our video, the payment terms and the currency are both auto-populated from this contact. So we're going to leave it how it is, but you can go ahead and change it if you want to. A PO number here. Certain businesses require a purchase order number. And this is depending on the type of service that you provide. You'll be able to add that number here or that purchase order number. And if you notice on the invoice, it's here. So you and the client could both reflect on that purchase order and be able to align on what it is. Now we need to let the client know what the invoice is for. What are they being invoiced for? And that's where the invoice title comes in. In our example here, this is for a February 2024 sponsorship. And then we want an itemized item list of what the charges are here. So this is for a meetup sponsorship. $5 is for that meetup sponsorship. We have a quantity of 1, but we can increment this up. And if you notice in our preview, it actually increments with the added taxes here, but we want to bring that down to 1. You can add any discounts here in this field next to it if you were to provide a discount on a specific product or in a specific month. You also can add the taxes here to make sure that is reflected accurately in the invoice. Underneath here, we have a description of what this line item is. And the line item is a sponsorship for our monthly meetup and workshops. That's so the client could once again know what it is that itemized item is. And if we go down to the next section, here's our payment section. So if we choose to leave this as a default, the invoice will inherit the global settings that you set in the checkout tab in Zaprite. For this example here, we want to customize this here. And we want to be able to turn on or off how it is that we want our clients to pay and what payment methods we want to offer them. For this example, we want an on-chain payment method. We want a fiat, debit, or credit card payment method. We want a lightning payment method as well. And we're going to leave this other on-chain payment off, so we know exactly where we want it to go, which is the Trezor wallet. We also want our clients to pay a premium for fiat payments. So here at Zaprite, we want to incentivize Bitcoin payments here. So anybody who chooses to pay with Stripe or with a debit or credit card is actually going to pay 10% more here for this purchase, as opposed to the person that is paying in Bitcoin. And once again, this is to be able to incentivize more users to be able to pay in Bitcoin. and many other reasons. So here, this tab here will allow us to remember this configuration for this contact, which is time chain in this example. We can go ahead and flip that on. That means that every time we send an invoice to time chain, these same exact payment settings will be saved in these preferences, and we wouldn't have to add them manually. They'll just be there every single time. Underneath here in the options is a customer note here. If you remember from our contacts video, this is auto-populated from the contact. You can go ahead and add to this. You can amend to this. You can change it and customize it in any way, shape, or form. You can actually preview here if we go back a little bit up to the payment. And you can see that this is what an invoice would actually look like when they receive it on their end. So you'll see all the information we have here. We'll see the taxes. We'll see the invoice number. And we'll give them 3 payments here, including a 10% premium for paying with fiat. So let's back up here. Now that we've reviewed this invoice and that we're ready to send it, we can actually either save this invoice in case we don't want to send it yet, or we can go ahead and hit the send button. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the send button because we already reviewed this. Now we have a send invoice option here. So you can email this invoice to TimeChain, our contact, and the email that you have on file. I do want you to note here that once you sent an invoice, you can no longer edit that invoice. That is extremely important. If you're not sure about the details inside of an invoice, please hit the X button here, go back and make sure that the invoice is absolutely the way you want it. Before I actually email this though, there's a different way of being able to share this invoice. So you can go ahead and select the share button. And we're actually going to get a public invoice URL and a public payment URL that you can actually share via Signal, via a messenger, or any other way, which will allow a recipient to be able to load this up in their URL, see it, and be able to pay that invoice without you having to email it to them. In our example here, we want to be able to show you what the email looks like. So we're going to go ahead and hit send again, and we're actually going to email this. We're going to review this information. This is our contacts email here. This is a message here that you can actually customize if you want. You can actually send a copy of this to yourself if you want to. We're not going to do that. And we want to include a PDF. A PDF is good to include so that the recipient can actually have one for their records. You'll have your Zaprite record to be able to reflect for your. So once we're ready to go, we're going to hit and select send. If you notice here now, the status of this invoice is now sent. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over and pretend to be the client here so we can see what it is that the client sees on their end. So we now have our Zaprite email here as the client, and this is going to be our invoice. It's going to say payment request. Bitcoin Events has sent you a payment request. The client will then go ahead and open it. They'll see the total here. They'll see the date that it's due, and they'll have an option here to review and pay that. You see now we're in the invoice here where the client can actually go verify that information one more time. And when they're ready to pay, they can select pay invoice. Here are the options here for on-chain, 10% premium for fiat and lightning. I don't want to pay this 10% premium here, and I want to settle as fast as possible. So I'm going to go ahead and pay this invoice with lightning. We're going to get an invoice that generates here. I'm going to switch over to my phone now, where we're going to be able to send funds. Scan that detail. If you see, it populates with the notes that you're paying invoice 1. It has a network fee. It has the amount and the total. And we're going to go ahead and hit send. Now, if you switch over to the screen here, you'll see that the order is complete. You have successfully, you can now go ahead as a client and download this receipt here if you want to. And if I go over back to the business as Zaprite, you'll notice that the status here is paid. I want to go back over to switch back to the client and see that they have received a receipt and a PDF copy of that receipt. And if I switch over to my business email, I'll see, nice, your invoice payment is confirmed. And we'll have an invoice number. We'll have the client who paid it. We'll have the status of complete, the BTC price rate, how much we received, and the fact that it is confirmed. If this was an on-chain payment, we'll see if it's pending, and then we'll see it confirmed. So now switching back over to my invoices, you'll see that this transaction here for TimeChain for $5 for their February sponsorship is now paid. And I can go ahead and create a new invoice and continue going from there.